also have the representatives from the Development Bank of South Africa. We will introduce them at appropriate time. Without any waste of time, I'm going to invite the Secretary of Parliament to come and present a statement. In the middle of the statement, of course, we will also share on the group the copy of the statement. The Secretary of Parliament, as you can see, is accompanied by the members of the management team within your space that you're occupying, as well as in the front here, the Secretary of the National Assembly, Masibule Letraso, as well as the Secretary for the National Council of Provinces, Advocate Pindela. Secretary to Parliament.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
And good morning to members of the media. And allow me first to appreciate that you have taken time to be with us this morning as per our invitation, and also to share with South Africa where are we as Parliament in responding to one of the most unfortunate incidences that befell us as the institution. And as you would also know, the impact of that tragedy at the time it happened last year on the 2nd of January. And we have now almost reached beyond a year from 2nd January 2023. And we are now in February. And the question that occupies most South Africans is, what is happening on Parliament? Are there any plans to fix what clearly is a huge problem that happened, and what do we take as steps to deal with that problem? So we felt it would be important at this moment to come and share, to make sure that our response also gives assurance to the nation that this premier institution in our system of governance is equally taking active steps to fix the houses of Parliament that were destroyed. So the statement I will read would outline what steps are we taking, what will be involved, and how we will undertake that work. So I will then proceed and read our statement. It has been slightly more than a year since the devastating fire that gutted Parliament's buildings. The fire broke out in the parliamentary precinct on the 2nd of January 2022 and ran over almost 3 days, destroying the National Assembly as well as parts of the old Assembly, including hundreds of offices for members of Parliament and staff, committee rooms where parliamentary oversight meetings were taking place, and in the process, millions worth of office contents were destroyed. We remain indebted to over more than 300 men and women from the fire and rescue services who worked tirelessly over more than 71 hours to contain the fire, thereby saving the rest of the physical buildings of Parliament, including the adjacent 10 East buildings, which houses the presidency, from destruction. Following the fire, Parliament immediately put in place various processes, including implementation of the Business Continuity Management Framework to minimize disruption of the business of Parliament, including securing alternative venues for the joint sitting of the two houses, for the State of the Nation address, as well as sittings of the National Assembly. In this regard, The site of Parliament then moved off to the City Hall, where we identified the need to continue on an ad hoc basis. The on-site Kudok chamber was also converted for regular sittings of the National Assembly. The damaged National Council of Provinces chambers, the IC systems were repaired, and the project for the hybridization of available committee rooms to enable both virtual and physical meetings. As you would know, Parliament ensured that we are able to continue, notwithstanding the huge distraction that took place, albeit on a hybrid basis, and where certain circumstances merited physical sittings, both in the chamber, in the Kudok chamber, as well as the City Hall as a temporary seat of Parliament. Assessments of the damage caused through the agencies were appointed by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. The first multidisciplinary team of engineers took at least 3 weeks of the preliminary assessment following the containment of the fire, while the second team, also appointed by Public Works, which is the Kuhat Development Corporation, took approximately 7 months to complete the assessment, including quantification of the damage and costs. And we received that report around June, July last year. Ensuring cost cooperation also, on the one hand, with law enforcement agencies, investigations continued around the incident and initiation of our own internal investigation around the issues of the work that happened leading to the fire. Initiation of marathon talks and negotiations on the restoration project with all stakeholders also continued. Most importantly, also engaging with National Treasury, and as you all will remember, this led to Parliament submitting a report to National Treasury based on the assessment done by Public Works, motivating for the budget. And we're pleased as Parliament that as at end of October, during the medium-term budget policy statement, 27 October last year, the Minister of Finance indicated an allocation of approximately 2 billion rand to enable Parliament to start its work. That also included the allocation to Parliament of an amount of 118 million rand to help Parliament to respond to unforeseen cost drivers that would have necessitated, in the absence of offices, in the absence of a chamber, what is the impact? Many of our members lost offices, and we had to try to find alternative office accommodation to help members in the interim, and part of this amount would help us to make sure that all members would then receive all offices. We are currently targeting around 155 additional members in terms of offices, to make sure that members are able to function back within the precinct, whilst other members around August 6, when we completed the reconnection of the National Council of Provinces, that also provided us with offices. And we're now running short of about 155 offices for members, and this allocation would help us deliver that. The work around this process also ensure that over the next medium term, we need to find appropriate venue to serve as a chamber, to also to make sure that members are able to return fully in terms of National Assembly sittings. That's part of the work we'll be prioritizing. We have also recently finalized the discussions around identifying, in the context of where we are, given the urgency of our work, what are other capacities that we can harness to help us do this work? Seeing that Parliament has got limited capacity to manage complex projects of this nature, are there any state institutions that can help us to partner to execute that work? So as we started at the end of October, we also started working in earnest to be able to assess our own capacity and be in a position to identify state institutions, agencies that can help us. As we do this work, no doubt, we know that South Africans have a vested interest in terms of seeing to it that this parliament is restored to its glory, and also to ensure that the heritage nature of the building is as much as possible retained. So for us to do this work, it is also imperative that it be properly managed in order to limit the risk associated with projects of this nature and magnitude, taking into account that it will be for the first time that Parliament will be executing a project of this scale. We are therefore pleased to announce that today Parliament and the Development Bank of Southern Africa, through its infrastructure delivery unit, we have agreed to collaborate in tandem with other stakeholders working with Treasury and Public Works that will be part of the processes going forward in respect of the implementation of this project. As we all know, the Development Bank of South Africa is the most suitable entity to play this role, given their expertise and their statement of capability that they have demonstrated assisting a wide array of government departments to implement massive infrastructure scale projects, such bodies as South African National Roads Agencies, the Department of Health nationally, Department of Public Works, as well as various departments that are implementing massive projects, your education infrastructure, and some municipalities, including departments of military. They have quite a huge program of infrastructure delivery in their portfolio. And to us, when we looked at that undertaking, given the urgency of the work that need to be done, we have identified them as the most comprehensive, multidisciplinary state institution that is designed to have the requisite expertise to help us manage a project of this nature. What also attracted us to work with DBSA is that as a state-owned enterprise that is helping the state in general, they are also, like any other organs of state, account to Parliament on any matter that needs to be undertaken. We will be able to work closely with them around implementing this project to make sure that we are able to account within the terms of the agreement for the delivery of these projects. It will also be important to also look into some of the areas that we would like to see, as we might not have our own capacity inside, but also look at issues around capacity development, technical support, and implementation of infrastructure in terms of us sharing expertise, and also look at what are some of these elements of this partnership. What will be involved in implementation of this project? There are about 4 areas that will be involved around implementation of this project. Firstly, the refurbishment of the banned parliamentary buildings, the old assembly building, the link building, and the National Assembly buildings. Those are the ones that were gutted down completely in terms of the fire. This would also include something that members have really raised with us, to say that much as we can't have access to this building, it's now a secured site under investigation, and also its own structural integrity is not guaranteed. We left some of our items and valuables in that facility. How soon can we be in a position to access it? We could not provide that answer, precisely because we are not sure about the safety of movement of people in that building. So one of the key deliverable tasks would be about the removal of rubble that is contained in that enclosed buildings, to make sure that we can also be in a position as Parliament to determine if there's any assets of Parliament that can still be salvageable in that environment. Can we salvage anything? If it is, what informs us to do that? So part of that work would entail us receiving guided tour of the facility, designation of any pathways we can utilize to access the building, so that we can also respond to Auditor General's concerns expressed to us, to say that in your asset register, tell us if there are any assets that you could still say can be saved and be kept in your register. If not, which ones can be removed? We could not offer that answer either. So part of the prioritization of this work would be to clear the site, make sure that we can determine with certainty what can still be secured, what will not be possible to secure. As indicated earlier on, the second task that needs to be a deliverable is about remodeling the 4th and 5th floor of 100 Plain Street to make sure that we can identify a yield of about 155 offices so that members can immediately be accommodated. It's one of the pressing issues that members raised with us several times, that the inconvenience of not having offices limits their ability to perform their work. So part of the deliverable would be for us to urgently prioritize that work to make sure that members can have offices, and also ensure that the 1,000 displaced staff members, we need to provide them with temporary accommodation so that they can also work on site and off site to the extent possible. The third area will be around rethinking the design of the precinct of Parliament, which is something that Parliament has been engaged on for quite some time at different terms of Parliament, to say the constraining factors, because these buildings are of quite a historical nature, the modern day requirements of a democratic parliament needs to be accommodated whilst we maintain the heritage integrity of these buildings. How do we ensure functionality of the office precinct that we have? So as much as we'll be focusing on restoration of the damaged buildings, simultaneously work would entail rethinking the precinct of Parliament in such a way that we can create much more usability of the precinct, optimize spaces, but also allow us to improve the security of Parliament. So at some of the incidents that happened, we are in a position to say that this is indeed a national key point. These are the heightened levels of vigilance around improvement of security. So that will be part of the detailed design, taking into account previous work that has been done around the design space of Parliament. The total facilities management would also be part of this work that we are identifying to make sure that in our engagement with public works, we look at areas where we could integrate the work of the development bank as our facilities manager, and that will be part of us scoping the work, but also engaging in detail with public works to make sure that we could start identifying areas of our work that when we complete the project, they could form part of Parliament, also contemplating managing its own facilities and assets. So in our view, those are the four main processes that would be elements of this project. We also think that the restoration project provides a unique opportunity to ensure that spaces are designed in a manner that best suits the specific needs of a democratic parliament, and also to modernize the institution's digital infrastructure. The Gutted National Assembly, for instance, was built in the 1980s and narrowly catered for few needs of members during that time. It is therefore envisaged that through this project, South Africa will have a new chamber that fully serves the imperatives of our constitutional democracy, which includes sufficient capacity for joint sittings of the two houses, a larger public gallery to accommodate members of the public in line with the Parliament's constitutional obligations of public involvement, more office spaces for members and committee rooms. It is envisaged that the project will be completed within 24 months and allow for a further 6 months period, what we normally call in construction industry retention period. You would have seen that in the assessment reports we have, given the extensive nature of the damage, it was envisaged that anywhere between 42 to 48 months to do this work. But we are pleased that in our discussion with the DBSA and taking into account their own technical capability, they have given us assurance that this project can be executed within 24 months and allow us then for the further 6 months to look at anything that could come, whether it's negs or whatever, to make sure that the damaged buildings could be completed within that period of 24 months. The issue of precinct design would also be completed within that period, if not less. But the actual work of dealing with whatever recommendation of the design around full precinct, as you would know, it will all depend on the allocation of resources, subject to us making motivation to say we think there's merit in further going forward on the capacity of the precinct to respond to other matters. The actual execution of that will be a subject of resources going forward. The completion of offices for members, the 155 offices. In our discussion, we said our target timeline is that by end of April, we must have 155 offices for members. We must have removed the rubber to make sure that any artifacts that are still there, any work of a historical nature, whether it is artwork and other things, we must be able to say this one can be retained, and also benefit from fixing what is evidently limitations to our current buildings. As we all know, these are very historical buildings. We have new standards now in terms of safety or hazard standards, and our buildings are indeed not meeting any of those standards. So part of the restoration must help us respond to the legislative imperatives of ensuring safety and compliance is of uppermost importance rather in terms of our own facilities. So we think that this kind of work would help us also to make sure that we are in a position where these milestones are adhered to in restoring the essential services to a more conducive and responsive environment that would help us address the much needed upgrade also of the security detail of Parliament that we know was severely tested and compromised that led us to the incident of fire. So part of it will be also to improve the entire security precinct. We think also it's also an opportunity for us to address matters of maintenance, which poses occupational hazards to staff and members. As such, the master plan will help us at creating a precinct that is befitting the stature of this apex institution of our democracy, which is Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. So on that note, that is our statement around the work we will be doing around this matter. Colleagues from DBSA are here with us. We also invited National Treasury, and this morning I think we all know that there's a budget forecast that they have. They've just indicated now that they are in full support of this initiative, and they would have been here, but they are now working on the issue of the budget speech this morning. So thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, STP. There are members of the media who are also joining virtually. We have requested that they must post their questions on the WhatsApp group as we normally do. But those who are here, you can post your questions to me directly, starting with yourself, Mercedes, and then newsroom, network, and Reuters. Okay, in that order.
Hello, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. The first question is the cost over the next 24 months. Exactly how much is it that you are going to spend to restore Parliament or those buildings? And there's a report you have mentioned about the various reports based on the investigations that were done by various institutions, but there's also one that must come from you, Parliament. How far it is it? Because Nehawu during the anniversary was saying it's concerned about the delay because there were potential security breaches that are being investigated. Just tell us a little bit how far that is, Mr. George. And then how much have you spent on hosting sittings at the City Hall over the last year or since you've been unable to utilize the National Assembly because it bent down. And then you say here you want members of parliament to return to work fully. Exactly how long is that going to take? Is that going to be after the 24 months and so on? And I've got two more questions. So you also say you can't guarantee the safety of people to enter the National Assembly building, for example. I know they said it's very unsafe, but when can the media have access to it and to be able to see what is happening, to be able to film and take pictures, to have an idea of what is happening, how the National Assembly got gutted? And if you say you can't guarantee the safety at this stage, when exactly do you intend to give feedback on that? And then there is the one of the SONA, very interesting. You say that when you are going to rebuild the National Assembly, it should be in such a way that it should accommodate when there are joint sittings of Parliament. Are you saying it's going to be much better than it was, where you had the NCOP members sitting on the benches? You have to put benches surrounded by National Assembly benches and members. Is that how we are going to restructure the new National Assembly building? That will be that will be the first round for now. Thank you.
Those were 6 questions from you. All of them, they are enough to constitute one round, the first round. Okay, can we continue with the rest of the questions? The hands identified.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Atim Tana from Newsroom Africa. My questions are also linked to what my colleague has already touched on. Should I use this mic? Both of them. Okay. So one of the questions then is around the security, given the fact that the fire happened while there was supposedly security around Parliament, and you mentioned how you would also look at the security detail around Parliament. Without going into detail, would you perhaps give us an idea of what you will do differently in order to secure this national key point, which was broken into, that subsequently led to this fire to begin with? And then the second question is around the internal investigations and what they have actually revealed. Thank you.
Thank you. Newsroom. Reuters? No. Network.
It's Christian Duplessis here from Netwerk 24. The questions I would like to ask is this 24 months starting today that it will take to rebuild Parliament, and exactly when will the rebuilding of Parliament start, on which date? And then for, let's say, the next 2.5 years at least, will Parliament continue functioning mostly online while the country faces numerous challenges, or what is the thinking about getting Parliament back to a sense of normalcy? Thank you.
Yeah, Wendell, it's all of the questions are similar and overlapping. So the one of the suggestions is firstly, is the DBSA the project lead? Would that be correct? How important is it for Parliament and the DBSA to finish this project on time and on budget? Parliament has an underground water system here. There's lots of sunshine. Is part of the design plan looking to incorporate sort of renewable energy? Is there something that you can say about something that you guys are looking to do that is maybe different from the old Parliament? And then just going back to some of what my colleague suggested, in here you suggest that besides getting space for displaced staff, getting the National Assembly, the new wing, up and running is important. Surely, in a project in this scale and complexity, it is a staggered approach that is going to be done. So then, in the staggered approach, is the National Assembly then taking primacy? That is your first one, so we can get the National Assembly sitting like it was and members here. Is that correct, or is it going to be we wait until everything's done and then we all come back together? So again, and if you can just reiterate, when do you guys break ground? When do you see then the first MPs or people returning? And there's just one point of clarity on the removal of rubble. Can you confirm whether approximately 40 tons of water that was used to douse the flames last year remains here and has not been removed? Thank you.
Okay, I think that was the first round of quite a number of questions from the colleagues here. I don't see anything virtually, so is Parliament?
Thank you very much, Program Director. Mercedes. Let me start with your first questions. How much are the costs for the rebuilding? As we indicated in our statement, there is work done on the quantification of the damage, and that work was undertaken through an agency of the state, which is KUKA, that was appointed by Public Works. They gave us an estimate figure of approximately 2 billion rand to be able to do the restoration. So that is on that basis that an approximate amount of 2 billion rand has now been allocated, confirmed by National Treasury. Perhaps more details might come to the fore tomorrow from the Minister of Finance, but in the medium-term budget policy statement that was made very clear around that. So that's the current estimate. But of course, as we all know, in any work that is being done, there is budgeting in terms of allocation of funds. Then there is detailed work that must inform the actual rands and cents in terms of the bills of quantities, and all of those are normally a function of a multidisciplinary team that must undertake what is normally called detailed design. What is the architect's brief is, what are the civil engineers' requirements are, what are the structural engineers' requirements are, what are the quantity surveyors saying in terms of estimates, taking into account building standards, all those issues. Then you have what is called bill of quantities. This is what the project will take, this is what is required. And that is a function of detailed design. So what we are confirming is the allocated budget to be able to undertake this work. It is our task to make sure that everything is done within that project. That's our task. Anything that justifies otherwise will be a function of a very thoroughgoing technical assessment, which we all know you would have from time to time, depending on what the discovery is on site. Site conditions determine otherwise, and we would have seen this in many projects. There might be conditions that requires deeper going down, we don't know. I'm not envisaging that will be the case. And in construction, will be referred to what is called cost variation or whatever orders that come to it. But it's not an easy point to allow that to happen. But what we can't escape is there's always something called variation. It can be variation less, variation more, but it's some subject of a proper work. We are confirming the allocation that we'll have, and ours as Parliament is to make sure that we stick to that figure to the best of our possible arrangement. That is also part of what will happen during project management, which will be regular points of interface about progress update, what is happening, so that the information agent tells us how far those matters are. Where are we with other investigations that were done, raised by Nehau, complaints and so on? There is work being done around that. And that work, we envisage that at the time it is concluded, we will be able to advise accordingly in terms of what work must be done to take the processes forward. So that was part of the internal work of Parliament, to look at breaches, if any, what are the vulnerabilities, what can we improve from our current state of security management, so that we are in a position to confidently put preventative measures going forward. And that will be our focus around that work. How long will it take for members to fully return to work? As we indicated, the issues of offices of members is of utmost importance to us. So at least from a functionality to be at offices, no member must say, I am unable to come to Parliament Precinct because I have no office. The office must be there equipped to enable functionality. That's not only the work of members. Members also sit in committees. So we have committee offices where members will be able to sit, and ours is to make sure that part of this work is to make sure that we must have full sittings in our committees as part of identification of support offices for committee rooms, hybrid and physical, but also deal with the sittings of each of the houses. At least for the National Council of Provinces, the infrastructure is fully restored. So at any given time, if that house and COP needs to sit physically, it's in a position to do so. If it wants to continue sitting hybrid, it's in a position to do so. Full virtually, today it's sitting at 10 as we speak. It will also be continuing until 4 p.m. for its own sittings virtually, and houses do function. The National Assembly currently uses the Goodhope Chamber, although it has got a capacity of less than 130 seats to sit. Members are able to sit on a hybrid basis. You would have seen that Parliament is able to utilize the City Hall as an off-site facility, wherein on any of its sitting, it declares them as part of parliamentary precinct. And that has been part of our arrangements with the City of Cape Town. Tomorrow, the National Assembly is sitting at 2 o'clock, receiving the budget to be delivered by Minister of Finance. And that's a full physical sitting. The State of the Nation address addressed by His Excellency last week was in the City Hall, full sitting. So that will be part of us in the meantime, with the limitation of us simultaneously fixing the business of Parliament must be able to continue uninterrupted. And it will be our task to make sure that it continues uninterrupted. When do we envisage full return back into the rebuilt National Assembly? That becomes a function of the project scoping and project timeline execution. So if we say we want this to be finished in 24 months, ours is to make sure that it must be done for that period. And when it is certified as secure and ready to be utilized building, then we can be able to say that's when that facility will be available. In the meantime, we need to make sure that the business of Parliament continues uninterrupted and respond to issues that members require us to assist with. So the issue of safety of the buildings, old assembly, structural engineers will be moving on site fairly soon, if not this week, to start doing assessment work around creating pathways to access the building, so that the work of removal of rubble should also start in earnest. So that will be a guided issue depending on the engineer's advice on how and what must be done to remove the water, remove the rubble, and clear the site. And part of scoping will be for them to complete that work. Simultaneously, they start with offices, they must also be starting with the work of removal of rubble. So we will not be able to say to you with certainty they will finish removal of rubble within 4 weeks. Once they present to us based on what the engineer's determination is, then we'll be able to say, as part of project monitoring, we envisage that this must be done. We will be happy if they say to us by end of March, they would have removed rubble. So all we want them is to move on site, start ensuring that the site is secured, the site is designated as such as a restoration and construction site. And then take guidance from there on what needs to be done. Artie, what will be done to improve the security management of Parliament given the breaches that have happened? Part of our work in our assessment, as you know, there's investigation being done, so that we look at all OHASA issues, safety and security standards, what needs to be done to ensure adherence to safety and security standards that befits a national key point. That also talks to us improving our own management and leadership of the security operations cluster of Parliament, so that it is properly resourced, it is properly given leadership at the helm in terms of ensuring that there's a head of security in Parliament, and we are able to support the current members who are doing very well to secure this building despite what happened. So ours will be to look at it to make sure that we have a comprehensive rethink of capacity, capabilities, but resourcing as part of the Parliament precinct redesign. How far are we with investigations? I think I've responded similarly to the same question. We envisage that we will be completing that work no later by end of March, to be in a position to say we now have clear recommendations on what improvements must we effect on those areas. From Network Christian is the 24 Christian, if I hear it correctly, is the 24 months starting today. How long will it take to complete the reconstruction? When will Parliament return back to normal? I've already responded on the return back to normal. But yes, the 24 months will be starting as soon as we have what is called handover of the site, which is going to be triggered by Parliament to the information agent to say we would now be handing over the site so that they can start moving in, do their own assessments, simultaneously do other work, and when they are ready to share with us detailed design, we will be able then to say with certainty by end of October what do we expect to be done, by end of January 2024 what do we expect to be done by June, and so on. So the timelines are monitored, they are clearly defined by the project lead, which is DBSA. Water plants, are we going to make sure that renewables are part of this, and so on? As I said, the issue of restoration of Parliament also offers us a prime opportunity to respond to what limitations were there in the first place. And those limitations are now indicating to us some of the compliance standards that are required of a facility of this nature are not being met. So that offers an opportunity to do that, to make sure that as we fix the issues of risk and safety compliance, simultaneously we look at what are the innovative measures that can also allow better use of the facility, optimize its utilization, and also infuse elements of modernity in terms of requirements of a Parliament of this stature. When will gradual phasing of the project takes place? I think I've responded. Once we have detailed design, but what we know is that these matters must run concurrently. When we provide restoration work, it's detailed design, removal of rubble, we must also simultaneously be starting with office work of refurbishment of offices of Parliament, including the removal of rubble. Once we have a clear plan, we'll be able to say the facility is now open for people to be able to, if there's a thought of what you take photos. So that will be a function of us being guided by engineers authority, so that we don't injure civilians in a buildings that are not safe. Thank you very much.
There is from virtual platform, my bong and my cleanup from independent media. Says the DA recently issued an ultimatum to the DA recently issued an ultimatum to the presiding officers demanding steps to return to full physical sitting. How has Parliament handled their demands? Have you reached some form of understanding with the DA? Was your response to the DA, if there was any, the same to what you are sharing with the media today? That is the first one. And the second one comes from Marianne Metam. She's asking, when was the whole of Parliament declared a national key point? Because previously the only buildings on the list of national key points were Dane Hayes, 100 Plain Street, and the National Assembly Chamber. Those are the two questions, Secretary to Parliament.
Well, what we're covering today is positive steps of what Parliament is doing and plans to execute to restore full return to Parliament by members, by staff. There are realities, of course, that we are facing, that the impact of the damages severely affected staff to be around this precinct. Equally, it severely affected members to be part of this. As I've outlined, Parliament is functioning. Parliament meets physically when it has to execute and transact a business that warrants full physical sitting of members, meaning each house, as well as joint sitting of both houses. And so far we're utilizing the City Hall. The issues of committees and restoration of offices is part of us gradualizing the full servicing of members to be able to operate fully back in a full service. The timelines we have outlined also envisage that the restoration work has to be executed within 24 months to make sure that what was damaged is restored. So that is part of the measures that Parliament is undertaking, and part of this briefing will go to various political parties, the heads of political parties, which I'm aware that the presiding officers will be meeting with them very soon, to be able to also to share the detail of the work of what is planned, how do we ensure gradualization. But of uppermost to us is to make sure that members of Parliament must continue their service in a manner that enables them to discharge their responsibilities, albeit it might be restricted because of some of the innovations that we have to make sure that business continuity of Parliament is not entirely disrupted. If we have to move to hybrid sitting, physical sitting, a combination of both, virtually as well, Parliament has been able to do that for this period. But we are equally concerned that we must complete as urgent as possible the restoration of the damaged Parliament. When was Parliament declared a national key point? I may not have a specific month that I know, but I know that the national key point has been in operation for quite some time, and the legislation was also amended. I may not know the law, the years, and maybe my colleagues can respond when was that declaration done. But all I know is that this is one of the national key points institutions. So my colleagues can answer that specifically, maybe one of them or Mabatu.
Let's have a seat for a few seconds. I think we are at a point where we can take the last round. So this will be the last opportunity so that we can release you. I'm starting with those that have not been given an opportunity yet. You'll be the first. You will be the second, the third. And then you want to come back again and not and then you will be the third. Newsroom, you will be the fourth. All the questions, it looked like some of the questions were not answered. Okay. And then out of the 7 questions, how many were not answered? Series?
Maybe if I can agree with those.
You will be the last. You will be the last one. Yeah. So that is the last round. Any other hand? Okay. There is no hand, and I don't see any. Yeah, from the visual platform. In that order.
This one?
Yeah.
Thanks, Manoto. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News. Mr. George, we know at least one political party does not support the rebuild of Parliament in Cape Town, and we know Parliament has said in the past that it's an executive decision that requires legislative changes, etc. The fact that you are going ahead with the rebuild, can we now assume that Parliament will not be conducting any further feasibility studies like you did in the past as to whether it's feasible for Parliament to remain in Cape Town, and that matter now gets put to rest? And then just, sorry, I'm being sneaky, Wendell's question wasn't exactly answered about whether the water still remains in the basement that was used to douse the flames. Thanks, Martin.
That water was removed, Mawato?
Yeah.
Yes. So the answer is yes. Next one.
Thanks, Moroto. Jason Felix, News 24. Mr. George, just a question of clarity. We know that the DVSA will be leading the project, but on the tender processes, have those processes started yet? You're speaking of design and engineers and architects, so one would assume that that a contractor has been appointed by the DVSA. Please, could you just clarify if that is in fact so? Thank you.
Thank you.
Just on a point of clarity, it's Christiania from Netwerk 24. Mr. George, are you saying that to enable a greater physical presence here on the precinct, what needs to happen is the rebuilding of those 150 offices that needs to be built, and secondly, the portfolio committee support rooms that you spoke about? Are those the two on the short term things that needs to happen to ensure a greater physical presence, and what else? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just a point of clarity. It's been a whole year since the fire broke out in Parliament. And besides what is currently playing out in court in terms of who was arrested, what is that internal report revealing to you as Parliament in terms of how the fire happened? Without obviously touching on the court matter, what is the report revealing about how the fire happened? I know you said you are waiting for the report, or the report will be completed by March, but since the fire broke out in March, and since the deployment of engineers through the Department of Public Works, what actually are you finding? And can you tell South Africans about how this fire happened? Thank you.
There's a question I asked about how much you've spent so far in holding sittings at the City Hall. It hasn't been answered. You also talked about a modern parliament. Now, as far as the National Assembly is concerned, I wanted to know, is it going to be in that way where you won't have NCOP members sitting on benches surrounded by national during SONA and joint sittings of Parliament? And lastly, and this is the last one, don't worry, Molota. I heard you saying that March, you gave a deadline of March to say those investigations, the report will come out. So I want to know, I know there are various reports, but the report, the Parliament report which comes from you, including those multiple investigations, are you saying this is going to be the final fire report with all the investigations, including the one that you have commissioned and the one commissioned by the presiding officers and all other investigations? Can you confirm, and thanks for giving the deadline, you say it's March, end of March, is it going to be the full Parliament fire report? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding your first question, I think the STP dealt with it, that regarding the nature of the new chamber, that it will have enough space, because this chamber that the fire gutted was not built take into consideration the imperatives of our constitutional democracy. So it was catering for the narrow interest of the minority. So this is an opportunity to have a new National Assembly that caters for the interests of our constitutional democracy, meaning that amongst others it will have sufficient space for the joint sittings, meaning that the members of the National Council of Provinces do not have to bring their benches when there are joint sittings and taking them out afterwards. So it will have sufficient space also for the public gallery, so that it enhances our endeavor to in terms of realizing the constitutional needs for public involvement. So those are some of the things, including sufficient office space, etc., etc. So I thought that was dealt with.
You didn't confirm when I asked the question.
Okay, I'm just clarifying so that he can deal with the second one. With regard to Ati from Newsroom, the question of, just so that I understand and the STP understand before he attempts to answer. So you are agreeing that you understand that the internal investigation will only be concluded in March, but you are saying that you want the findings now. Is it what, just so that we understand the question correctly, so that we don't get it wrong when we try to answer it?
Not the findings in the entirety, but what it's revealing in terms of how
The fire happened.
Which report are you referring to?
The one that is going to be released in March.
Yeah, but the report we don't have, it's only coming in March.
I think my colleague just
Hmm?
basically summed it up. Preliminary investigations and what they are revealing. Given at the back of the fact that this has been a long time coming, it's a year, what can you tell South Africans about how the fire started?
Okay, let me leave it to the Secretary to Parliament to deal with. That was the last round of questions. Let me just, before I sit down, check if whether we've got any from the virtual platform. Okay, there is no question on the virtual platform. Secretary to Parliament.
Thank you very much. I'm now wiser on the issue of the declaration of Parliament as a national key point. So I've been advised that it was 2018, the declaration of Parliament fully as a national key point. The issue of the design of the new assembly to accommodate all the members and no benches, the program director has indicated clearly. We have to address that part. So part of the detailed design must help us to make sure that some of the modifications that had to be done and improvisation that had to be done, it must now be responded to, so that we have a full response to sitting of members, but also maximize the gallery for members of the public as part of Parliament's involvement of the public in its own affairs. So that will be part of that area. The issue of offices and committees would also ensure that we must also identify limitations that we currently have of committees of Parliament, where committees, if they have to sit simultaneously, we're unable to provide them with the physical offices, all of them. So part of the work for us is also to identify, so that when 155 offices are present simultaneously, we must also ensure that if committees have to sit and they require full physical sitting as a committee, they must be able to do so. So that will be part of us continuously assessing attendance of full committees, hybrid settings, and other areas. What we have also observed over the last 2 years during COVID, the ability of members to function very well and be able to attend to multiple issues. If they have to be here, ordinarily they would have to travel all the way to KZN to start a new public hearings on a bill. But now they are able, through innovative measures of hybrid, connect whilst the member is sitting in KZN and immediately attend to other matters. So you are able to optimize that. So we must also look at it from a benefit point of view, as opposed to in the past when members would sit here and then the next time you have a turnaround of another 12 hours to travel to Limpopo for the next public hearings on a bill. Now they can attend to that and switch over to the other. So how do we, in the context of maximizing full return to physical sitting, but also maintain areas where innovatively it optimizes the work of members to be at different places and be flexible in terms of mobility? That will be part of our business continuity model going forward. The issues around the investigations, Artie, I think let's wait for us to complete that work. What we do know that we have vulnerabilities, that we know. We have vulnerabilities that exist in the institution around security and circumstances that led to that vulnerability being heightened. Those issues are part of what the report will tell us, but we do have vulnerabilities. And when we have the report, we would equally share the findings of that report, what remedial measures we intend undertaking to make sure that we are in a position to strengthen our environment, at the same time making sure that issues of this nature do not recur to the best of the institution's ability. So I would rather say wait for us to allow that process to continue. Matters around the court, around proceedings for people who are identified to be instrumental to that, those matters are running and they are best placed to be allowed to be ventilated in our courts of law. We will, however, refer and respond to issues that pertain to our own internal environment and how we will improve our vulnerabilities. And by the end of March, hopefully, we would have that report, as I said, by the end of March, and we'll be in a position to apply our minds and be able to share what is feasible at that particular time. Thank you very much.
There are outstanding questions that have not been answered.
The one on
Just
the
mention them.
The one on the cost at the city hall.
Okay.
And on that report coming in March, will it be the full fire
Yes,
report?
yes.
There was also a question about the relocation, which I think has not been answered. I'm interested to hear.
Okay.
It was not asked by me, but I want.
You are right.
Okay.
You are right. I noted some of them. Will the matter of feasibility be put to rest and so on? Maybe let me start with that one for eyewitness. There are two processes running. What we are reporting is that there's a restoration work. Restoration work responds to the damaged buildings that we have. Parliament has a duty to do that. So regardless of any other discussion of contemplating relocation, restoration is a compulsory responsibility of Parliament, and that is governed by the National Heritage legislation. So the work we are doing, we have to restore Parliament. Of course, correctly as we are saying, there's been work done around feasibilities in 2018 if we were to find other sites elsewhere where. And those reports have been presented back to Parliament, ventilated, shared with members, at the same time focusing on this. So what we should not confuse is those are two different processes. From time to time, Parliament would take a view that says, is there merit in relocating? What will be the informants of that? And consider all those considerations, but take into account the constitutional implications about determination of the seat of Parliament, that it can be anywhere at any time, based on Parliament's operational requirements. Necessary declarations take place. But I would imagine a project of this nature around full relocation decisions, that is a matter that also concerns every South African. Parliament would, in its own program, determine how it wants to undertake that, necessary consultations, and make sure that that work from time to time will be undertaken. What is the cost of sitting so far? Now that Parliament is not meeting inside the damaged buildings, we are currently using the City Hall. And we started using the City Hall, as you know, last year during the 2022 SONA a month after the fire. We have also used the City Hall for the medium-term policy statement in 2022 October, which is a standard sitting every year. We have also used it for, as recent as last week, for the State of the Nation address, the same City Hall. We have also used it for the memorial service for our late first democratically elected Speaker of South Africa. Memorial service was in the same City Hall 3 days before SONA. Tomorrow we're using the City Hall for the budget. We have used the budget, the City Hall, for the replies to the President's debate, 2 days debate and the reply on Thursday. Same applies to the budget. The National Assembly is sitting tomorrow. There will be discussions around this matter. So for these 2 years that we have used the facility, we have budgeted about 15 million rand plus, and for the first year we utilized it for the budget in October. That was more than R1 million. We have also, for the SONA, utilized around 4 million last year. And for these sittings of SONA and the budget and the memorial, we budgeted around 8.5. So total around 15 million rand that we have budgeted for the utilization of the City Hall. One of the main cost drivers in that project is off-site facilities for media, for broadcasting. One of Parliament's tasks is to deepen democracy and show public participation. So as you know, whenever SONA is sitting and the budget, more than 44 million South Africans are watching. So the cost drivers that relate to that are quite significant, more than the City Hall sitting itself. So for 2 years, those are the budgets that carried that implications for us to be able to do that work. As I said, we have DBSA in the House. There was a question about, have you started employing a contractor to do this work, or you are still doing your work that will then determine? I think the question is about excitement. Is there a contractor to start rebuilding? And I thought I said very well, you have processes that are involved, scope determination in terms of detailed design and so on. And all other work that needs to be done, I'm sure they can be in a position to respond. If you are able to do so, Mr. Trainer, Trainer Rampele from DBSA, as he was announced, is here. And I'm not sure whether you would want to give indicative tasks that would be occupying your mind to move as speedily as possible as the implementation agent. Would you want to send to Mr. Chen, to Mr. Rampele?
Thank you so much. We have just started the process of packaging the implementation plan for the whole entire areas that you've addressed, STP. And I think, as you said, between now and the March, we'll be putting together solid and concrete plans to deal with the issue of procurement, as well as particularly beginning to define the concrete timelines as to when we're going to really be in a position to actually start and remove the rubble and the debris, and also then beginning to have a sense of when we're really going to activate and start with the detailed design, and that will be a process that will be done between now and March.
Thank you very much. I hope we have covered all the... I said the fire report and any other investigation that was part of that, as commissioned by presiding officers and or audit committee of Parliament, all those reports will be ready by end of March. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Peter, I just want to 100% clarify. You're mentioning the cost of having events off-site. I just want to clarify, because I'm not sure the Mayor of Cape Town says
the City of Cape Town has not charged Parliament for the use of the venue. So all those other costs that you detailed are for other things, but not actually paying the City of Cape Town for the actual use of the venue. I'm almost sure the mayor has even said that to me personally, that we do not charge Parliament for the venue.
Okay. I'm sure there's a very competent person in the team that will respond to that. Mr. Kasa, you want to respond to that part?
Now, I think we do need to clarify, and this point has been clarified even previously, that a large portion of these costs go to broadcast infrastructure and others. But we do pay for the venue. It's a very minimal. I mean, the one I can remember, I think for the MTBPS we paid about 16,000 rands. But a large amount indeed goes to hire of equipment, the infrastructure, broadcasting and ICT equipment. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of our press briefing. I think every question has been answered, including all the questions that Mercedes asked. All of them, they've been answered. So thank you very much, Secretary to Parliament.
I think the legal advisor would want to just clarify something. Sorry. No, I think the point is making. Look, the cost that we're dealing with is from last year to now, and we're saying whether there's any costs for the hire of the venue. And I'm saying there is an amount, but a large portion of what we've mentioned, the STB has mentioned, goes to hire for the infrastructure. So for the current period, what we're dealing with is a budget of 8.2. We still need to work out the actual of what we have spent since the memorial service, the sauna, and the budget tomorrow. I will just give an example, for instance, of the MTBPS process. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Secretary to Parliament and two secretaries, the management team, for the attendance. Thank you very much, kindly, Mr. Troine Rampele, for your attendance. You were supposed to be in front, but I see you are leading from the back. You were able to answer very comprehensively, even from the back. Thank you very much, colleagues, and thanks for your understanding and for your mercy and for giving us for starting late. The press conference is adjourned. Thank you.